I know that you will be respectful and pay attention, and let's welcome them.
Good morning. So what ages are you guys?
13. Some of us are 14 today.
My 14-year-old daughter is going to Highland Tech, and she just completed all of her 8th grade work and is starting 9th grade. So I have a brilliant kid at home. My son, who is 16, is still in the middle of his sophomore year, because he's a little bit slower than my daughter is. But so I have 7 kids, 14 to 29, and I have 5 grandkids. Do I look that old?
No.
You can see the white in the beard, right? So you guys, we always talk about peer pressure, right?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to give in to peer pressure, right? You walk your own path. You do your own thing. You don't want to do what the group think is, right? Because that's when you get in trouble. Well, I gave in to peer pressure. My wife says, "You are retired. I want you to grow a beard." So I'm growing a beard for my wife. It is a lot of work, and I am not into work. I like to relax because I'm retired, right? But my wife wants me to grow a beard, so I'm growing a beard. So let me ask you something. How many of you think that Anchorage has a gang problem? How many of you were born and raised outside of Alaska? Okay. How many of you were born and raised in cities that had a gang problem? Okay. What city? Atlanta?
Here.
Oh, right here? California, what part? Oakland? Okay, anybody else? Gang territories outside of Alaska? So, how do we determine what a gang problem is? Yeah?
You have a gang in your city?
Yeah, but how do we know that? How do we figure that out?
By seeing if it becomes an annual thing, like something that happens more than once.
So the best source for that is from the media, right? What were you going to say?
I was going to say the kids in the school.
Kids in the school, right? You might see kids that are flagging. You guys know what flagging is? If you've got a bandana hanging out of your pocket, or you're wearing a particular style of clothing, something that identifies you as a gang, right? There's all kinds of things that kids will do to identify themselves as a gang. But the best source of information you get is from the media. But where does the media get that information?
They make it up.
They make it up? How about the police department?
Oh, yeah, that too.
Right? Wouldn't the police department kind of know if there's a gang problem? So in May of last year, I retired after 29 years in law enforcement. Okay, I started as a cop in 1986. Were any of you around in 1986? No. 1996? 2006? So I was born and raised in central eastern Utah. I am a Mormon. Do you think there were many gangs where I grew up?
No.
My town was like 2,500 people. We had one high school in the entire county, 450 students. Okay, it was a farming, mining community. You were either a farmer or you were a miner, coal miner. So there weren't many gangs, right? In fact, it was all white. There weren't even any other races or ethnicities in the town I grew up in. I didn't meet anybody that wasn't white until I was in college. Kind of a sheltered life, right? Yeah? So, what would a middle-aged white guy who's follically challenged, right, because I'm bald, but I'm horizontally gifted, because I'm white, right? What do I know about gangs? What do you think? Yeah?
What the media puts into your head.
What the media puts in my head. Okay, I was a police officer for 29 years. And I worked in Anchorage for 22 years. Okay? And the last 8 years that I was with Anchorage Police Department, I was the gang intelligence officer. It was my job to know who the gang members were in town. That's what I did. All the time. And for 2 years, from 2006 to 2008, I worked undercover with the FBI. I grew my beard out. I had it out long enough, I was braiding it. I had an earring. I was wearing leather jackets. I looked like a Hell's Angel. I had a 99 Tahoe with tinted out windows, and I would drive through Mountain View, Fairview, Spenard, and I bought guns and drugs from gang members. That was my job for 2 years. Best 2 years of my 29-year career. Because guess what? How many of you are adrenaline junkies? How many of you like to do things that put you on the edge? Yeah, well, guess what? Being a police officer, you're on the edge all the time. There were many times when I was driving through Mountain View, and I thought I was going to get in a shooting. There were several times where I actually drew my gun and put it in my lap because I thought somebody was going to shoot me. That's an adrenaline rush, right? Very dangerous adrenaline rush. But you know what? I made friends with a lot of gang members. It got to the point just before I retired where they would arrest a gang member, and the gang member would be taken to the station. They would tell them, they'd say, I don't want to talk to anybody but Loft House. And so I would get called in and go interview them because I developed a rapport. Just because you're in a gang doesn't mean you're a criminal. It's not illegal to be in a gang. You guys understand that? It's the activities that they're involved in. So the decisions they make aren't the best decisions in the world, right? But that doesn't mean that they're always bad people. Now there's some of them that are just lost. They just have no conscience. And you're never going to be able to deal with them. But most of them are just kids that got on the wrong path. So I'm going to profile a few crimes for you right now. Because the best way to know about what's going on in Anchorage is by what's happening on the streets, right? So let's talk about this. Does Alaska have a gang problem? Khalil Gross-Mininaw. Has anybody ever heard of Khalil? Khalil was shot to death when he was 15 years old. Khalil was tattooed and was a hardcore gang member at 15. He went to Clark Middle School and then East High School. He was at Diamond Center. How many of you go to the Diamond Center? Oh, yeah? How many of you go to Northway Mall or Fifth Avenue Mall? You know, malls are a big place for gangs to hang out in the evenings. Diamond Center used to be really bad. We used to have a pool hall down there. You guys know where the theater is on the second floor, right? Right across the hallway from the theater, there used to be a pool hall called Hot Shots. And Hot Shots was a big hangout for about 4 different gangs from South Anchorage. We used to have fights there and shootings in the parking lot and everything. So Khalil was a member of a gang called Soldier Crew. Soulja, S-O-U-L-J-A, because they had soul. Come on, you can laugh. I don't tell these jokes for my benefit.
Soldier Boy.
So, what do you think they wore for their colors if they're soldiers?
Camo.
Camouflage. Camouflage bandanas, camouflage jackets, anything they can find was camouflage. So, we get a call of a shooting at the Diamond Center. And while we're responding to the Diamond Center, we're also getting calls of guys running down the old Seward Highway with guns. Okay? But the interesting thing is, they weren't running away from the mall. They were running towards the mall. So Khalil was at the mall with a couple of girlfriends. And when Khalil got shot, who do you think the girls called? No, they didn't call 911. They called all the homeboys.
Oh.
They called all of Khalil's gang buddies and said, Khalil just got shot by the JDs, the juvenile delinquents. We need help. So they only lived a couple of blocks north of Diamond on the old Seward. So they grabbed their guns and they started running down the highway to get to the Diamond Center to go protect Khalil. So we have to respond to 4 different locations to go chase people. So guess what? We caught several of them. And guess how old they were?
14. Or 18, 16.
15, 16, 17 years old. Okay? You can see we've got a couple of them in custody. You know, there's a gun right here, a gun right here. There's ammunition right here. Bandanas, other guns. We did a search warrant on their apartment, found more guns. So, by the time we get to the mall, Khalil is basically dead. The medics transport him to the hospital anyway, but he had a bullet in the head and one in the jaw. And on his right shoulder right here, he had SC tattooed, which represents soldier crew. So typically, once you get tattoos, you're pretty hardcore. Why is that? Pretty permanent. You can take them off, but it's extremely painful and it takes a lot of work. You guys know Megan Fox, the girl from Transformers? She has tattoos. She's got one on her forearm of Marilyn Monroe. And I saw her on, I think it was Leno, before Jimmy Fallon took over, before Leno retired. And she was talking about having that tattoo removed. And what they have to do is they have to take a laser and they burn your skin. And they can only burn it for a little bit. And she says it smells like popcorn, burned popcorn. And your skin literally pops like popcorn. And so they only burn a couple layers of your skin. Then they have to let it heal. Then they have to go in and burn more layers. And it takes 10 to 15 sessions per tattoo to get your tattoo off. And it leaves a permanent mark because you're scarring your skin, right? So my advice to you is if you're going to get a tattoo, it needs to be something you're willing to keep your whole life. You don't want to get something now and then in 15 years go, man, I wish I hadn't gotten that tattoo. Because it's expensive and it's painful. Okay? So, Khalil was transported to the hospital where he was declared deceased. Now, the two guys, there was actually three, but there were two of them that shot. The two guys that shot Khalil, of course, fled before we got there. And we weren't able to immediately find them. We eventually found them out in Palmer, hiding out with one of the guy's cousins. This guy right here, Alberto Geraldo Zayas, hanging out with his cousin. Now, we put together a big team, SWAT, troopers, APD, FBI, marshals, ATF, and we went out there to the house to go arrest him. And as the team, and you guys have watched the cop shows, and you see all of them decked out in their gear with their helmets and their machine guns and everything, right? And as they're moving up the driveway to go arrest him, he's actually in an SUV that's parked out front. His female cousin is in the driver's seat, and he's yelling at her, drive, 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 and she's refusing to drive because she can see all the cops coming. So he assaults his cousin, throws her out of the vehicle, and steals her car. And they end up in a big pursuit. You can see this picture down here in the bottom. They end up chasing him all the way down the highway to Eklutna. You guys know where Eklutna is? They spiked the tires, took out two sets of tires, and finally he had to stop because he's on rims. He had no tires. And we took him into custody. Now normally when we arrest somebody, we take him to the station, right? But we took Alberto to the hospital because he had a gunshot wound in his leg. But I want you to look at this. See, there's two bullet holes. Two bullet holes. Right here, right here. And they run down his leg. So if you're in the business of firearms, it's what we call FOT. Finger on the trigger. When your adrenaline is pumping through your muscles, what do your muscles do? They twitch, they contract, right? So if he shot himself. Either as he's pulling the gun out or as he's putting the gun back in his belt line, he pulled the trigger and shot himself.
Good job.
Okay. Now guess what? We did not charge Alberto with Khalil's murder.
Because he didn't have any.
Because Khalil pulled his gun first. And it was self-defense. So what we've found happen before 2005, we were having dozens and dozens of gang homicides and we couldn't prosecute. Because if one half is dead and the other half says he pulled his gun first and we have no evidence to refute that, we can't charge him, right? It's self-defense. So in 2006, we passed a law that said if we can prove that it's gang-motivated or drug-motivated, we can charge everybody. Suspects, victims, whatever. If you had a gun and you were shooting, you can get charged. So, a few months later, that was in 2005, okay? A few months later, we had a shooting at the liquor store on Boniface. You guys know where Party Time Liquor is over there by the Tesoro station on North Boniface? Party Time Liquor, there's that strip mall that's got the gas station in it. At the far end, there's a liquor store. Anyway, this gentleman right here, Kentron Navette, He went by the nickname of Kinfolk. He was a member of the Gangster Disciples out of Fairview. Kentron and his cousin, Victor Pepper, who was 14, were in a car and went to the liquor store. Victor Pepper stayed in the car. Kentron went into the store. Within a matter of minutes, Tinius Talamailo, who was the leader of a Samoan gang called the Outlaws, shows up at the liquor store with a brother and another associate gang member, and the three of them walk into the store. They see Kentron. They don't like Kentron. So what do you think they did?
They shot him.
Nope. But they did jump him. They started hitting him with liquor bottles and beer cans and punching him, and 3-on-1. Kentron was losing, right? So, like the good family member that he was, the cousin that he was, 14-year-old Victor Pepper grabbed his gun out from underneath the seat of the car, ran into the liquor store and started shooting at Tinius and his brother and friend. Tinius pulled his gun and chased Victor out of the store, shooting at him. Tinius got hit in the ankle, and it almost tore his foot off of his leg. There was a piece of skin at the front of the ankle, and that was the only thing keeping his foot attached to his leg. And what do you think happens when your foot's almost torn off your leg?
You can't walk.
You can't walk, but what else?
You fall.
You have the femoral artery, right? You bleed to death in about a minute and a half. Our officers got there as he was laying in the alley behind the liquor store behind a car, bleeding to death, and they were able to save his life. And he actually had his foot reattached, and he is fine. He still runs from us today. Tinius got shot multiple times by Victor, jumps into a car, his brother drives him to the hospital where he is declared deceased. Multiple gunshot wounds to the chest. We did not charge Victor because, again, self-defense. He was defending Kentron. 14-year-old Victor shot and killed somebody. Yeah.
Isn't it only self-defense if it's towards you?
Nope. Defense of others. Yeah.
Oh.
So, Kentron had a few injuries, not very serious. What does this mean to a gang member?
Blood.
Oh, what is it?
Okay, yeah, red for blood. So what does it mean when you burn a bandana?
That, like, you know, you're not scared of the gang.
Not scared of the gang, but it's like the ultimate disrespect. How many of you, and I don't know how patriotic you all are, but I know that it makes me pissed off, when you see somebody burning the American flag in protest. Okay? That's what this is. They call bandanas their flags. And when you do something to the bandana, it's just like doing it to the American flag. It's the ultimate disrespect. You know, we had a big gang fight over at 6th and Boniface. And when the officers got there, they arrested about 15 gang members. And one of them was a 14-year-old girl. 14-year-old Samoan girl. She assaulted a police officer. And as they were, they had her handcuffed, and as they were searching her for weapons, they pulled a folded blue bandana out of her pocket, and they dropped it on the ground. Because they were just pulling everything out of her pockets and dropping it on the ground. This 14-year-old girl began to headbutt and kick the officer, yelling, "Don't disrespect my flag," over a 10-inch piece of cloth. Right? It's crazy. So what do you think happened to the guy that burned this bandana? Yeah, he jumped into the passenger seat of the car. There was at least 7 rounds through the windshield, and he was declared deceased. And that actually happened in Fairbanks. Okay, how many of you have heard of Desiree Douglas? 17-year-old girl that was shot to death at a party. 36 in Muldoon. There was a house, they were having a house party. Mom and Dad actually bought a keg for their child, and then they left for the weekend, and they said, "Have fun." And they had a house party on Friday and Saturday nights. And it was gang after gang after gang. There were at least 7 different gangs that were at this house party over the 2 days. Friday night, no issues. Saturday night, we had big-time issues. We had a gentleman by the name of Julio Batista. Julio was Desiree's boyfriend. Julio went to the party with his brother and a couple of associate gang members. While Julio was there, his brothers and friends left the party to take some girls home, leaving him there by himself. Then some rivals Chris Mejia, DeJohn Hale, and Warren Lynch all showed up. Now, Chris Mejia was a member of a gang called Face Side Bloods. Face Side. Bought a face, east side. Face Side. So they were basically East Side Bloods, Boniface Bloods. That's what he was, a Blood. Warren Lynch was part of KC, Corrupted Crew. Corrupted Crew was a hybrid gang. They had Bloods and Crips. It's all about the symbol. What color is the Kansas City Chiefs?
Red.
And what about the Royals? Blue. So it's all about the symbol, the KC. But KC comes in red and blue. So you could be a Crip or a Blood and be in that gang, which is completely weird. I would go to gang conferences in the lower 48 and tell people that I've got Crips and Bloods in the same gang, and they'd look at me like I was stupid. And I'm like, I'm not stupid, it's them that's stupid. They're the ones that are mixing it up. But we've had hybrid gangs in Anchorage for 15 plus years. And the lower 48 just started seeing it in the last 3 or 4 years. So these guys don't like Julio, so they jump Julio and they beat him up. Julio leaves the party, runs next door, calls his brothers. His brothers, who are all members of Young Gangsta Niggas, YGN, show up at the house party. And as soon as they pull up to the house, they begin shooting. And Warren Lynch and his buddies begin shooting. There were at least 10 guns that were being fired during this gunfight. Desiree Douglas was running across the front lawn trying to get out of the line of fire, and she got hit in the back of the head and killed. Now, we never saw the bullet. The bullet went all the way through her, and we never recovered it. So we could not identify which gun actually shot her. So I spent a year and a half doing background on these guys, and so that I could go to the grand jury and charge them with the murder. So these guys right here are MOB, money over bitches. What does that mean? Yeah?
Money is more important than girls.
Yeah, absolutely. But what did you guys see in the news recently about Fairview? We arrested a bunch of gang members, right? But what were they called? They were called Member of Bloods, MOB. MOB stands for Member of Bloods, but it also stands for MOB, money over bitches. The Crips that are associated with MOB call themselves money over bitches because they don't want to call themselves Bloods. But the Bloods call themselves members of Bloods. Okay? So these 4 guys were involved. So this is Devontae Jordan. I know. Why is that so low? Is there a way I can move that?
Oh,
Can I just touch this?
I think so.
No, it's not that.
You can zoom out. Oh, wait, no.
For some reason, it's cutting off the bottom of all my slides.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I can't remember his name now. Sherm Joshua, that's what it is. So these guys were friends with KC, so they were at the house shooting at the other guys. And then these 2 guys, and you know what's sad? I know these 2 guys very well. They're from Panama. They come up here to live with their aunt because their parents were both killed. Moises did time in Panama adult prison at the age of 15. Hardcore gang members, very hardcore. They've been involved in numerous shootings, stabbings, baseball bats, murders, and they're still not in prison. But you know what? These guys are phenomenal soccer players. I've had kids that have played soccer for years, and you go to Cook Inlet, or you go to Rush, or you go to some of the soccer clubs, and you talk about the Martin Loras. Every coach in Anchorage knows who these guys are because they are phenomenal. And they could probably go play semi-pro soccer someplace in the country, but they choose to stay up here in gangbang. Unemployed, dealing drugs, shooting people. So, about a year and a half later, we have another homicide. Devontae Jordan. Remember Devontae Jordan from right here? Part of MOB, involved in the Desiree Douglas homicide, right? So Devontae Jordan gets arrested on a weapons offense. He goes to McLaughlin and he gets interviewed by the detectives about an officer. You guys remember the officer that got shot in Fairview? You would have been little when it happened. But we were looking for a particular make and model of gun, and these guys had that gun, or one like it. And so we were interviewing him about that case. But Devontae said, I don't know anything about the officer shooting, but I can tell you all about Desiree. So he spent 3 hours doing an interview about Desiree. And then when he gets out of McLaughlin, guess what? He gets murdered by his own friends, own gang members, for snitching on the Desiree Douglas case. So remember who's in MOB? Remember Baldwin? He was involved in the Desiree Douglas homicide, and he was the one that set up the murder of Devontae Jordan. So he went to jail at the age of 18 and a half for 2 capital murder crimes. Pretty hardcore, right? Does this surprise you that this is happening in Anchorage? No, not really. So, you guys ever heard of Out the Cut? Or Bay Dilla? No? He's a local rapper. He actually had a pretty good song. That's My Hood. That became pretty popular. Anyway, in 2012, we indicted 8 people for a conspiracy to import over 50 kilos of cocaine. Out the Cut Records. That's Bay Dilla. A couple of his buddies. This is his brother. This is an associate of his. This young man right here doesn't like me. We were in federal court and he swore that he was going to kill me and my family. These guys. Now these guys are all from the age of 24 to 35. So do you think the gang problem is a youth problem or is it an adult problem? Both, absolutely. But the median age, I've identified over 2,500 gang members in Anchorage over the last 8 years. The median age for them, the average age, is 28. I have gang members in their 60s up here that are still flagging, that are still dealing dope, that are still teaching their kids and their grandkids and their great-grandkids how to be gang members. Yes. We have 4th generation gang members up here. So anyway, these are a bunch of other gang members. These 2 don't fit the profile, do they? But they were arrested in this gang crime. April 1st, 2014. You guys heard of Precious Alex? Asleep in her bed in her apartment in Mountain View, and somebody walked up to the apartment, shot multiple rounds through the window, and killed her in her bed. 14 years old. I'm sorry, 15. She was the victim of a gang retaliation. The shooter had been assaulted by a family member of hers. The shooter thought he was shooting the adult family member, not a child. Multiple gunshots, multiple bullet holes in the glass of the window. January of 2015, I responded personally to this crime because I knew this young man, Christian Haynes. You guys remember reading about the double homicide on 41st Court where the husband and wife were shot to death?
Yeah.
Christian Haynes and Crystal Hawk? Yeah. That happened on a Tuesday. 3 days before that, on a Saturday morning, they used to live over in the college apartments over off Eureka, behind East High School. I responded to a shooting where 2 guys in masks kicked down the door of their apartment and ran into the apartment, blasting at least 40 rounds into the doors and the walls and everything. In fact, the bedroom wall for Christian's apartment was an adjoining wall for the neighboring apartment. And the lady in the adjoining apartment had her bed against that wall and was in her bed. And the bullets went right over top of her. Semicircle over her while she's laying in her bed. Yeah, do you think these guys care about anybody but themselves?
Yeah.
Who do they care about? No, they don't care about anybody. How many of you guys heard about the shooting downtown at Rum Runners before Rum Runners closed? Blood versus Crips. Right? A kid by the name of Brandon Tutua from West High School. Used to hang out downtown with his cousins. He wasn't old enough to go into the club, so he'd just hang out on the sidewalk. Remember the Martin Laras from Panama? Angel and Moises? They hated Brandon. And they assaulted Brandon. And Brandon pulled a gun, shot Angel twice, and then shot 3 rounds at 3 of Angel's buddies, missed all 3 of them, hit a 24-year-old girl 2.5 blocks away. What? 2.5 blocks away. She's walking across the street to go get in her car and go home, and she gets hit right above the clavicle. Just missed the aorta.
Wrong
She
place,
did.
wrong time.
2.5 blocks. Do you think bullets stop when they miss something? And they keep going until they hit something. So if you shoot at somebody and you miss them, where does that bullet go? Keeps going, right? That's why officers are very careful about what they shoot at, because we have a responsibility to the public to not endanger them, right? So every bullet that we have in our guns has our name on it, because if we fire it, we're responsible for wherever it goes and whatever it hits. But gang members don't care. They just spray. Yes?
You like write it on before you shoot?
No. That's a figure of speech.
Oh.
Because they
No,
can,
you're not right.
when they gather evidence at a shooting, they can tell who shot what bullets by the gun. Okay, so when I was at the shooting scene on Rica, I was talking to Christian, and I kind of got in his face because I'd known him for many years. And I told him, I said, Christian, your rivals just stepped over the line because they brought your family into it. Do you normally have families involved in the gang warfare? That's usually just the gang members, right? But they actually were shooting at his wife and his kids. They had 2 little boys, and they were hiding from the gunfire. And so he told me who it was that was responsible. And then his brother Christopher shows up at the house, and Christopher was more hardcore than Christian was. And I told both of them, I said, don't retaliate. You need to let us solve this crime. Less than 3 hours later, there was a retaliation shooting by Christian, Christopher, and their younger brother over on San Roberto, where they shot up a rival apartment. Over 40 rounds fired from the street into that apartment. And they just didn't hit that single apartment. It was a multiplex with 6 units in it. They hit 4 of the 6 units. 4 of the 6 units. Do you think they cared who was in the other 3 units they shot? No. And so, 3 days later, on Tuesday, January 27th, Christian and Crystal were shot to death in their house. Their 2 little boys are orphans now. And you can see right here on February 8, 2015, Michael Reynolds, member of the Fairview MOB, was arrested for their homicide. There was more than Michael, but Michael will not talk, and we haven't been able to gather enough evidence to charge anyone else. December 10th, this is a rap group called All the Time Entertainment. These guys are all members of the Fairview MOB. And they also go to all the parties in town and rap. And the FBI, you guys might have seen this, they arrested 12 members of the Fairview Bloods, a couple of them that are out of California, for multiple shootings and gun weapons offenses, right? And drug trafficking. So there's Tattoo, Fairview. And these are all the names and ages. You can see they're not young kids. These are all adults, right? But where do you think they start? There's some pictures of them throwing some gang signs. Okay. How much time do we have?
10 minutes.
Okay. We're going to go through this really fast. Let me ask you something. So the definition of a gang, there's 3 people that have something in common that identifies them as a gang. That could be a Little League baseball team, right? Because they all wear uniforms. So they're identified as a group. Does that fit, though? No, because the second part of it is you have to attempt individually, jointly, or combination in the past 3 years, commit 2 felony crimes as a group. Okay? So that's my job, to validate people. And by the time I retired last year, I had identified... Is that going to go away? I had identified... this is hard backwards. Can I get it?
Oh my. Do you need help?
I had identified over 70 criminal street gangs and over 500 validated gang members. Okay, but I had over 2,500 names in my database. It takes time to validate somebody. Okay, so let's keep moving on. These are some of the gangs that we have in Anchorage, just a few of them. We identified over 225 criminal street gangs in Anchorage. Okay, so what are gangs all about? They're all about power, about respect, right?
Money.
No, it's all about power. Money is a byproduct. Money is a byproduct. It's all about respect. You guys have heard of street credibility, right? Street cred? Yeah, it's all about respect. So, why did Brandon Tatua shoot Angel? Because for 3 weeks before that evening, Angel and Moises and their buddies were driving down 4th Avenue threatening Brandon. We're going to kick your butt. We're going to do whatever. Brandon, what would we do if we were always getting threatened if we were in the same location at the same time every week?
Lock myself in my home.
Quit going.
Yeah.
Report to the police. Right? Something like that. Well, this is what Brandon did. He put on all his red clothing, had his red Boston Red Sox hat, his red Boston Red Sox jacket, his red shoes, and he got a gun. And he took the gun downtown with him. So what's he doing?
He's trying to let down Zoya.
He's challenging Angel and Moises, right? They've been threatening him. Now he's throwing it back in their face. Okay, well, if you're so tough, bring it on. Why? What happens if a gang member backs down?
Because they're
What happens to their credibility?
it makes them seem like they're cowards.
Makes them seem like they're cowards. So have you guys ever heard of the samurai code, the Bushido code? You know, they always talk about losing face, right? That's the same way with gangs. Same way with gangs. That's why gangs are so violent. They cannot back away from a threat. They have to meet it head on. Does that make sense? Because you lose your credibility. You lose face if you don't. Right? So, respect equals fear. Do you think that's genuine respect? Like fear? When everybody's afraid of you, is that really true respect?
Yes.
No, not at all. But you know, guess what? When you join a gang, why are you running away from your family to join a gang?
Because they don't respect you.
They don't respect you, or you don't like the rules that they have. There's a number of reasons. You don't feel loved. So you go join a gang. But guess what? A gang will discipline you. You violate the gang rules, they'll discipline you. Just like your parents were. In fact, a gang will discipline you harder than your parents would. We have video of the the Latin Kings in Chicago having a big meeting. The Latin Kings are so big in Chicago, they actually rent city parks and hold their meetings. 200 gang members in one place having a meeting.
That's scary.
And they had one guy that had violated some gang rule, and they took his bandana away from him, made him go stand outside of the group. They had a meeting, they decided six guys were going to jump him and beat him up for 60 seconds. And so they jumped on him and they beat the tar out of him. And he's not allowed to retaliate or to defend himself. He could cover up, but that was it. And then after they beat on him for 60 seconds, you think that 6 guys for 60 seconds could do some damage? Yeah. You think your mom and dad would do that to you for violating a rule at home? No, because they'll go to jail for one thing, right? But they still love you, even though sometimes it doesn't feel like it. But they beat this guy up, and then they pick him up off the ground, give him back his bandana, and welcome him back into the gang. So gangs will do discipline. No, that's my gang right there. You like that?
Is that Elmo?
Yeah, Elmo's a little pissed off. And Grover's getting high. It's legal now, right? So, this is out of Fairbanks. 15-year-old dad. 15-year-old, got his grill, throwing his pitchfork. Do you think this kid has any hope of not being in a gang? Dad's a gang member, brother's a gang member. You think that kid's going to stay out of it? No. It's a family enterprise. Right? That's why it's so hard to stay out of gangs if you have a family member that's in gangs. There is a lot of money that's associated with gangs. Let me ask you this. How many of you know a retired gang member that's living off all their money they made with drugs? Really? No, Al Capone's in prison. He's dead now. But he went to prison. He didn't get to keep any of his money. The government took it all. Okay? I don't know any gang member. You know why? Because eventually you get caught. And when you get caught, what do the police do with all your money and your possessions? We seize it. Have you ever seen the Hummer that our SWAT sergeant drives around town?
Yeah.
The black Hummer? We took that from a gang member, a dope dealer. He paid $80,000 cash for that car. And we took it. It had $12,000 worth of rims on it.
Wait, you can do that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna get caught.
When we arrest you, we take your vehicles, we take your houses, we take your money. We arrested a drug dealer, Mascovea, back in the early 2000s. We took 3 houses from him.
3?
3 houses that he had bought.
What you gotta do to get that?
I wish I had 3 houses.
He had bought homes, and because he had used drug money to buy the homes, we took them.
Why do you need 3 houses in the same place? I mean, I understand if you have them in like different places, but
Diversification. Okay, you guys heard of jump-ins? We very rarely have jump-ins up here. Mostly it's just a bunch of guys that get together and decide they want to be a gang, and they just kind of bless in. Recruiting. Number 1 location is schools. What age do you think they start recruiting? When do gangs form?
Right now. As we're like
Younger. Yeah, they recruit at this age.
I think like 11, 12.
3rd, 4th, and 5th grades.
Oh, whoa. Say that.
Now, why do you think that 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are forming gangs? What's going on?
No.
We have the news, we have the media, we have older family.
Sure.
They do what they see.
Easy to manipulate. There's all those external factors.
Oh.
Yeah.
They want to be like the older sibling.
Want to be like the older ones?
They're impressionable. You can tell them.
Impressionable. The B word.
Books?
B-U-L-L-Y.
Oh.
Bullying. There was a social scientist by the name of Skinner that did a study in Chicago back in the 50s. Okay? We're talking 75 years ago. Did a study, and he found that gangs formed on the playgrounds of elementary school because of bullying. Now, we don't see a whole lot of kids that are in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade wearing bandanas, sagging pants, running around calling themselves Crips. Although we have seen it. Wonder Park Elementary School had a gang of kids, 4th graders, wearing blue bandanas to school every day. Okay? So, it can happen. But we don't see that normally. But what happens is they become these groups for protection, right? For defense. And then they morph into bigger gangs as they get into middle school and high school. Okay, we're way out of time. Males, of course, have the largest population, but the fastest growing population, gang population in the country, 14, 15, 16-year-old females. They're into all kinds of criminal stuff. 2.5 kilos of cocaine that my buddy Jack Carson and I seized when we were undercover.
What do you do with that?
We destroyed it. All kinds of reasons. Gang identifications. You know, we talk about colors, nicknames. Sometimes people are kind enough to put all their nicknames on social media. I have profiles on about 35 different social media platforms, and I am not a white cop. I am a Pacific Islander gang member from California, and I have thousands of friends, and I know all about all of them. So, do you personally know every single friend that you have
No.
on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat or Pinterest or whatever you happen to be on?
You know what?
Because you might be my friend.
I'm gonna go look at my friends now.
You should. Floods, burning bandanas, stepping on bandanas, disrespectful gang signs. Oh, sorry, didn't get through it.
Keep going.
Keep going.
I will watch. I will stay and watch.
Have a nice day, folks.
Thank you, guys. Huh? Maybe.
Wait, what? I did not understand that.
Oh,
Yeah, but it scares me.
Works in fair.
Oh, now you're immortalized on my video.